You are standing in a line that is not moving. Your phone is dead. There is nothing to look at, nothing to read, nothing to do but exist inside your own head. Within 90 seconds, your mind starts scratching at the walls of your skull, looking for an exit. That feeling is not a modern glitch. It is not something invented by short attention spans or too much scrolling. It is one of the oldest alarms your brain has ever built, and the real answer to why it feels unbearable is far stranger than boredom being simply the absence of stimulation. Boredom feels like nothing, but nothing is exactly what your ancestors could never afford to feel. For most of human history, an idle mind in an idle body was not a rest state. It was a warning. A mind with nothing to track was a mind not tracking predators, not tracking weather, not tracking the location of food, water, or rivals. So evolution did something clever. It made stillness itself uncomfortable. It built boredom as a kind of hunger, not for food, but for information. And like hunger, it was designed to be impossible to ignore. Think about what an actual idle moment looked like 80,000 years ago. No walls, no roof, no guaranteed safety. A small group resting near a water source, waiting for the heat of the day to pass, waiting for animals to move on, waiting for a wound to heal enough to walk again. Waiting was constant. Entire seasons were built around waiting. And yet the record left behind by these long stretches of forced stillness is not a record of blankness. It is a record of scratched geometric patterns on ostrich eggshell, of beads strung from shells carried hundreds of miles inland, of tools reshaped over and over long after they already worked perfectly well. Something was driving hands to keep moving even when survival did not strictly require it in that exact moment. Here is where it gets strange. In 2014, psychologist Timothy Wilson ran an experiment at the University of Virginia where he left people alone in a bare room for 15 minutes with absolutely nothing to do except think. No phone, no book, just a chair and a device that could deliver a mild electric shock if they pressed a button. Many people had said beforehand that they would pay money to avoid being shocked. Left alone with only their thoughts, a striking number of them shocked themselves anyway, not because they enjoyed pain. Because sitting with an unoccupied mind was worse. Your ancestors would have understood that discomfort instantly, because for them it was not a curiosity. It was survival math. So what did they actually do with it? They did not sit still and let the discomfort win. Philosopher Andreas Elpidorou, who has spent years studying boredom as a signal rather than a flaw, describes it as a kind of internal nudge, pushing you towards something more meaningful than whatever you are currently doing. In a small hunting band 40,000 years ago, that nudge did not lead to nothing. It led somewhere. It led to the fire circle, where someone started reshaping a story they had heard 100 times, changing one detail, watching how the group reacted. It led to a hand picking up a stray piece of ochre and dragging it along a cave wall, not because anyone asked for art, but because the hand needed a job and the mind needed a problem. It also led to games. Long before dice were carved from bone, humans were carving marks into sticks, dropping shells to see how they landed, inventing small contests out of nothing but pebbles and dirt. Assyriologist Irving Finkel, who has spent decades at the British Museum studying the royal game of a board game more than 4,500 years old, has pointed out that once you give humans a set of rules and an opponent, boredom evaporates almost instantly. The board itself is nothing special. 2 rows of squares, a handful of pieces. What makes it addictive is the same mechanism that made your ancestors restless in the first place, an unresolved problem, a mind hungry to close the loop. What is striking is how far back this pull goes, and how independently it shows up. Carved gaming boards appear scratched into temple roofs in ancient Egypt, into rooftop stones in Bronze Age settlements, into rock surfaces across regions that had no contact with each other. Different continents, different centuries, the same basic idea keeps reappearing. Turn dead time into a contest with rules and the discomfort of stillness disappears. Nobody had to teach separate cultures to invent games out of boredom. The impulse was already sitting there, waiting for hands with nothing else to do. This is the part that should reframe everything you thought you knew about being bored. It was never a punishment. It was a pressure valve, engineered to push idle minds toward invention. Boredom is why someone eventually noticed that a sharpened stick thrown a certain way flew farther. It is why someone, staring at nothing, started grouping stars into shapes instead of just seeing scattered light. Necessity gets credited as the mother of invention, but boredom might be the one who actually did the pushing. There is a darker side to this pressure valve, though, and it explains something about your own habits that might feel uncomfortably familiar. When boredom has no outlet, it does not just fade quietly. It escalates. Ancient groups that were trapped, whether by bad weather, injury, or isolation without access to their usual outlets for this itch, show up in the archaeological and ethnographic record engaging in more erratic behavior, more risk-taking, more conflict with each other. The mind that cannot find a problem to solve will sometimes manufacture one, even if that problem is a fight with the person sitting next to it. Boredom without release does not evaporate, it curdles. You can see a smaller version of this in modern isolation studies, from overwintering research stations to submarine crews sealed away for months. Give a group of capable, intelligent people nothing to solve, and small irritations expand until they fill the entire room. A dish left in a sink becomes a grievance. A joke told once too often becomes a feud. None of this happens because the people involved are unusually petty. It happens because the ancient machinery underneath them is still scanning for a problem, and when none is offered, it will manufacture the nearest available substitute. Your ancestors would have faced this exact dynamic during a long storm that kept the whole group crowded under one shelter for days, unable to hunt, unable to gather, unable to do anything except sit with each other and their own restlessness. This is likely part of why storytelling became so central so early. A good story does not just pass time. It gives an entire trapped, restless group a single shared problem to chew on together, a mystery to solve, a danger to survive vicariously, a joke to land at the same moment. It redirects dozens of individually curdling loops of boredom into one collective loop that resolves together at the same fire at the same time. That is not a small trick. It may be one of the reasons small hunting bands were able to stay cohesive through the worst stretches of forced stillness without turning entirely on each other. Now think about your phone. Every time your thumb moves toward it in a quiet moment, you are performing the exact behavior your ancestors performed at the fire circle, at the game board, at the cave wall. You are answering an ancient signal that says find something to close the loop. The difference is that your ancestors' outlets push them toward creation, connection, competition, meaning. Your outlet, more often than not, pushes you toward a feed engineered to give you the sensation of closing loops without ever actually closing one. You get the itch scratched for 3 seconds, and then the itch returns because nothing was actually resolved. It is boredom's ancient machinery, hijacked by something that profits from you never fully satisfying it. Compare the two loops directly. The fire circle storyteller closed a loop every time the story ended, and the group walked away with something they did not have before, a shared memory, a lesson, a laugh. The gaming board opponent closed a loop the moment the last piece landed, win or lose, and both players knew exactly where they stood. The endless feed closes nothing. It is built from thousands of tiny, unfinished loops stacked end to end, each one promising resolution just one more scroll away. Your ancestors' boredom pointed outward, toward other people and toward the world. The version you inherited today is very often aimed at a screen that gives back less than it takes. This is why simply removing boredom from your life, which is what most modern habits attempt to do, backfires so completely. You are not designed to avoid the feeling. You are designed to be moved by it. Elpidorou's research keeps circling back to this same point. Boredom is not the opposite of a good life. It is one of the engines behind it, as long as you let it point somewhere real. The ancient humans who thrived were not the ones who never felt restless. They were the ones who let that restlessness build the story, sharpen the tool, learn the pattern in the stars, challenge a friend to a game with sticks and stones. The feeling was never the enemy. What you do with it was always the entire point. Consider how differently your day might feel if you treated the next wave of restlessness the way a hand at the fire circle once treated it. Not as a problem to be numbed the instant it arrives, but as a nudge with somewhere specific to go. Wilson's shock button experiment did not conclude that people are broken for wanting to escape their own thoughts. It concluded that an unoccupied mind will reach for almost anything rather than stay unoccupied, and that the quality of what it reaches for matters enormously. A hand holding a piece of ochre and a hand hovering over a glowing screen are answering the exact same ancient call. Only one of them tends to leave something behind worth keeping. So the next time you're standing in that unmoving line, phone dead, mind scratching at the inside of your skull, you are not malfunctioning. You are running software that is older than agriculture, older than writing, older than the wheel. It is the same restlessness that carved the first board game, painted the first wall, and pushed a hand to throw a sharpened stick just a little bit farther than the one before.